Now, if I didn't make this clear enough last video, I love murder drones. I love the story, the plot, I love the characters. There were only two aspects of the show that I actually had a problem with. And they weren't even really that big issues, they're more like nitpicks. My first problem with the series as a whole is the simple fact that it was too short. And it really shows, especially in the last episode. The last episode was way better animated than the other episodes. And that's saying something, considering the episode before that was probably the most high quality episode that we got thus far. But the simple problem, the problem with it, is the fact that it's too short for an ending to a series, especially one so prevalent in the YouTube community. But because of the fact that it was so high quality and it took so long to make, it kind of outdid every other episode for me. Is what I would be saying if it wasn't for this episode. This episode to me feels like Murder Drones at its peak. Not only did episode 6 nail atmosphere, but it also nailed the soundtrack and the sound in general. This episode to me represents the jump in scale and quality. Not only did all the voice actors really step up their game in this episode, but the episode had probably the best pacing in the entirety of the series. You can just tell that they put a lot of time and care into pacing, specifically for this episode. I just really feel like I have to bring that up because this one did exceptionally well in that regard. A thing that really helps hammer in the level of atmosphere is the use of a song with vocals in it. Okay, look, I know last video I was absolutely harping on how good the final episode's music is during the fight, but this music takes the cake for being probably the most atmospheric piece of music in the entire series. This is also the first Murder Drones song to incorporate vocals, and they spared no expense. I feel like they intentionally designed the music with the change in scenery in mind, because it's easily adjustable so that way they can make it more or less scary depending on the situation that's happening. It also just generally blends in very well with the sound design. Also, enough about the music, they have freaking raptors! Yep. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, reason 2. So if you watched my last video, then you'll definitely know that I have a little bit of a nitpicky issue with the dialogue of the characters. Now, a lot of you in the comments have already told me various ways to get over that, and honestly, you guys are all right. I feel like, yeah, I just think you guys are all correct on that part. It's just the thing I wanted to bring up. A thing that I noticed pretty recently when rewatching the series is that I found another reason for why Sin even used these 3 drones in the first place. She needed to find compliant drones that were capable of not interacting or fighting with her in the slightest. You know that iconic bit that N always says? The "I love doing anything" bit? Yeah, that was never a bit. The same sentence he keeps blurting out constantly, or at least a lot during the series, happens to be a very key detail about the group as a whole. They love doing anything. And I mean anything.
Sure, I love doing anything!
You know, you're one of the main reasons I wanted your team to retain your personalities. You always surprise me. Loved doing anything.
Episode 7 did a really good job at showing just how little control humanity has over Sin. In its opening scene, we see people scrambling around a church in the middle of a cave for some reason. We see people desperately trying to control a situation that has already been completely blown out of proportion. They don't know it yet, but there's absolutely nothing they can do in this situation. In fact, I think this situation has gotten so out of hand that even in the very beginning scene, the very first person we see in this opening scene is a hologram. Did Michael actually grab his lab coat? Was this a staged choreograph? Are these guys real or is this guy real? Wait a second. Was Michael ever real? Wait, hold on. He just walked out of the door. How? In the 30 seconds that it took for him to walk out the door at most, how did Sin kill everybody in that room without so much of a whimper? Unless no one in there was real to begin with. Hear me out. If Sin just took that entire church, then how is there already developmental growth and a giant hole in the middle of the... None of it was real to begin with. There's no way. So in my last video, I talked about a multitude of characters from the series, but there's one character that I neglected to talk about, mainly because I wanted to get the video over, and that character is Jay. Jay was a pretty interesting character in that there's not really that many episodes surrounding her, and she's barely ever shown in any episode other than episode 1 and 2. This character just seems a little bit forgotten, kinda. And this is kind of one of those avenues that they could have explored further if they were given more time to do what they wanted to do. But I feel like they made the right call here. You know, sometimes I really wish they added at least a few more episodes or a little bit of backstory and just various other things in general. There's a lot of moments where I sit and ask myself while watching the series, what would the humans do in this situation? What were they doing in this situation? And how do they overcome it, if they even survived? I just wish we were able to have a few more, at least like, scenes of murder drones, or just drones in general, or people in general, fighting back against Sin. It would flesh out the universe a little bit more, and it would just generally make the story feel a little bit more complete. At least in my eyes. Episode 5. The episode that absolutely confused the ever-loving hell out of me and everybody else watching. But don't worry, I'm here to give such a terrible explanation of episode 5 that you won't even need to worry about that, because you're too busy worrying about me and my crappy voice cracks in the middle of my recording. The reason why episode 5 was so confusing for a lot of people is that there's this very specific detail that serves as the purpose for why they're even in the past in the first place. That detail being that Sin is hacking into both N and V's minds right now. And in order to save them, Uzi has to enter their minds and basically just kind of install like some sort of antivirus or some crap, I don't know. Overall, the reason why this episode appeared so confusing for most people who watch the series is because in the very last episode, they didn't really add any build-up that really suggested that this was going to happen. It just kind of happened. And since it happened, this episode happened. This was the end of episode 4, Cabin Fever, by the way. And this was the beginning of episode 5. Making a movie and or a series is just a very difficult thing to do, in general. Not that any of you didn't know that, but I sure as hell do. You know, I also think there's a lot of other things they could have done to the series to help explain some untied plots and also other things like, what the hell is up with this raptor? But even though the series ended prematurely in my opinion, at least it had a pretty good ending to boot. Not to mention a pretty insane revelation. Yeah, I'm looking at you, whatever the hell you want to call yourself. But yeah, thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe, just subscribe. I'm gonna... Hold on. I have a couple things I want to drop on the fan base first. That's Not Doll and Sin and the Absolute Solver are literally the exact same.